Passion Harvest.
Hello, passionate listeners. Welcome to Passion Harvest. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world. I'm Louisa, your host, International Passion Ambassador. I'm so excited about my guest today. Her name is Roberta Grimes. Roberta Grimes has had two extraordinary experiences of light as a child. Roberta is a business attorney who has spent decades studying nearly 200 years of abundant and consistent communications from the dead, quantum mechanics, and the nature of consciousness. This is going to be so exciting. Roberta is the author of over 7 books, including The Fun of Dying, Find Out What Really Happens Next, The Fun of Staying in Touch, which details some of the ways that the dead give us signs of their survival, and The Fun of Growing Forever, which reveals what must be the easiest and most powerful method for attaining spiritual growth and building your own best life. Roberta hosts a radio show and podcast called Seek Reality on webtalkradio.net. Her shows and podcasts feature interesting and sometimes controversial topics and guests. Their purpose is to help you develop an understanding of what is actually going on. This is her story and this is her passion. Roberta, welcome to Passion Harvest.
I'm so glad to be with you. We're going to have so much fun with this.
I'm excited as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I'd love to start with your experiences of light as a child that you discuss. That sounds absolutely fascinating.
Well, when I was 8, and this was in April of 1953, I actually think it was April 9th, but I have no reason to think that except that's what I've been told by Spirit. I woke up in the middle of the night, good little Christian kid, and realized there's no God. And I was terrified. And in the middle of my terror, there was a flash of brilliant light in the room, like magnesium burning. And into that flash, which was just really a flash, a voice spoke. It said, "You wouldn't know what it is to have me if you didn't know what it is to be without me. I will never leave you again." Now, when you're 8, everything surprises you. So nothing really surprises you. I thought, oh, isn't it great? If you forget there's a God, they remind you. And I went right back to sleep. But that experience, as is true of all these experiences, was vivid in my mind forevermore. I still feel as if it just happened last night and it happened, a million years ago. I thought I would learn about it naturally in the course of growing up. When you go to church, eventually somebody's going to tell you what happens when you forget there's a God. Right. And eventually, because I never asked a question, I never got an answer. Eventually, I majored in Christian history in college, thinking I would then become a minister or something like that. And I never asked the question. I still didn't ever get an answer about what happens if you forget there's a God. I got very sort of bummed about that. And one day I came home from my summer job, sat down. I was 20 at the time, sat down on my bed. I was feeling really glum. And over my right shoulder came the same light. It flashed in the room, beautiful music. And the same voice said, "I will never leave you."
That's beautiful.
So that was when I knew I am the dunce of the universe. No one else had ever had this happen to them even once, and I had to have it happen twice.
Well, lucky you.
Oh, no. So I spent years saying, okay, God, I know you're there. Do not please ever do that to me again. And unfortunately, that turned out not to be the case. I never had it happen again. I wish now I hadn't asked that question.
What did it feel like when you had that experience? What did God feel like?
It wasn't God. It was my primary spirit guide. It was an internal voice. The light was external. It was in the room. In fact, I still remember that room because of the light. But the voice was clearly internal. If you had been in the room, you wouldn't have heard the voice. And in my case, it was a young male voice. And the reason is my guide is male. And everybody who lives in the afterlife is young. It was a very different voice from the voice she had in old age. But my mother had a similar experience, actually, when she was very old. And in her case, the voice she heard, she was convinced was God. And what's very strange to me, maybe not so strange, is that as she aged, she became very senile. And when she could no longer recognize her children, she still remembered that experience.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad ask the question. So you obviously have direct communication with your spirit guides.
We all do. We just don't remember it because we talk to them at night and they talk to us at night. But it's quite possible more and more people now are in direct communication, daytime communication with their guides. I am now as well, because the veil between worlds is thinning. We've been told it will be thinned, and indeed it's happening now. It's quite an active experience at this point.
And why is that? Why is it thinning and more people are waking up?
I don't know if you've noticed, but things are becoming a lot more negative in the world. There's a lot more hatred, a lot more anger, a lot more just plain negativity. And in fact, this is a long-standing problem. It goes back at least into the 19th century. And so beginning we're told in the late 19th century, the beings who are in charge of this planet decided that they had to help us raise our consciousness vibration because we're no longer able to do it on our own. There's a great project ongoing at the highest levels to make it happen, to thin the veil just enough so that we can communicate through it much more easily. And that's why it's happening now. There's quite a lot of that going on. It's not a fad. It's simply that it's easier, so more people are doing it.
And in turn, with the thinning of the veil, removes some of that fear and the hatred and the negativity of humans.
Yeah. The single biggest source of fear in the world is the fear of death. The fear of death is the base fear. When we no longer fear death, believe it or not, we no longer fear anything. The mortgage payment, that our dog will, bite somebody else. We don't fear anything when we don't fear death. And that's what the purpose of all of this really is, to help more of us understand that life really is eternal. I mean, I was allowed to do research that if it had been the intention of the highest level beings to run this planet to keep us from knowing the things I've learned, believe me, I would not have been able to do it. I have never been fighting any upper level entity. They've been helping me all along. As long as your intention is purely to help the world, they'll help you too.
Oh my gosh, this conversation is getting more and more exciting. I just have to ask you, because this is such a hot topic at the moment. How do you see the future of life on Earth? Is it positive? There's so many doomsday theories or talks?
Of course it's positive.
Okay.
This planet is very useful. We come to this planet to grow spiritually, because in what we think of as the afterlife, really the astral, which is most of what exists, there isn't enough negativity for us to be able to push at all. Now, imagine yourself wanting to get fit physically, and the only place you have to be is, on your couch, just watching TV or enjoying being, sedentary. You're not going to grow much. Your muscles are going to kind of atrophy. Well, when we are in what we think of as the afterlife, our minds atrophy. The mind is the only part of you that's real. And it needs negativity in order to raise its vibratory rate. And therefore, we come here as if we're a spiritual gym. We come here to learn negativity and to learn how to deal with negativity. And that's why bad things happen to good people. When we're there, we would rather be there than here. We don't want to come back here, but we know we need it. So we think, what the heck? If I'm going there, I'll plan a horrible life.
That's a great analogy.
Really help me grow spiritually, and then won't have to come back anymore. It's not hard to raise your spiritual vibration. It's just that you need to understand that's why you're here, and do what is required to actually benefit your mind, raise your vibration, make your consciousness more loving and more powerful.
So your belief of what I'm hearing is we definitely choose to come back to this life, and when we reach a certain level, we no longer need to return to this physical plane.
Well said. That's exactly true.
And often people ask, well, that's great, but how do I raise my vibration? How does one do that?
You have to push against negativity to raise your vibration. Actually, the simplest method for raising your spiritual vibration was given to us by somebody who lived 2,000 years ago that nobody ever pays attention to now. His name is Jesus. He told us in the Gospels the easiest, the quickest way. And it's amazing how fast it works. And you don't even need a lot of negativity to do it. Jesus came to earth specifically to teach us how to raise our consciousness vibration. Nobody up until this century even knew what that was about, but that's the reason he came 2,000 years ago. And he told us then his teachings were the important part of his being there. If you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Direct quote. Nobody pays attention to his teachings. Everyone thinks he just came as sort of a living human sacrifice to die because God is so cranky, God can't forgive us unless he gets to watch his son be murdered. This makes sense to church people. It makes no sense to anybody else. And of course, it's all made up. It's made up. It's not real. What is real is that God thought it was time 2,000 years ago to raise our understanding of how we grow spiritually, because that's the reason we are here. And he gave us those teachings. Jesus is genuine. He came from the highest aspect of the Godhead. He actually is God on earth. I don't know that it's ever happened before or since, but Jesus came as God on earth.
And for someone who's not familiar with the teachings, what are the teachings in a simplified form?
I can't put them in a capsule. What I can tell you is the Fun of Growing Forever includes the teachings that are relevant to this question. They tell us how you can grow spiritually. I was curious to see if it worked, to tell you the truth, when I first understood what he had been doing. You wouldn't have liked me before. I was not nice before. But I did manage to raise my spiritual vibrations to the point where I'm told now this is my last earth lifetime. That wasn't true when I first came into it. It's not hard. It really is easy.
Okay.
And it's not religious either. It really has nothing to do with any religion.
It doesn't necessarily mean you need to attend church. It's just a complete mindset change.
In fact, all religions are based in fear. You know, good God-fearing people and all that. And fear is the opposite of love. If you are fearful of anything, death or anything else, you are doing the opposite of raising your vibration. You've got to get rid of all fear.
And as you mentioned previously, the fear that's one of our greatest fears, about dying. And look, we're all going to die. What happens when we leave our physical body or when we die?
Oh, it's just playtime. My book, The Fun of Dying, Find Out What Really Happens Next, very much understates the fun. It's a lot more fun even than I can express to you when you finally are free of this boat anchor that is a body on earth, and you can go home to what is a glorious, glorious eternity. It's so beautiful. It's earth-like and it's beautiful. Right now, no matter who you are, life sucks, then you die. Isn't that sort of the summary? Eventually, we know we're all going to die. And if that means our minds blink out, we're no longer in existence, that makes everything a downer. Even happy things are just a prelude to dying, right? But when you understand that this is the bad part, the good part comes after you die, especially if you've lived your life well, you suddenly are living on an eternal flame. You have infinite time and infinite pleasure.
When we're up there, do we think, oh gosh, this is so fabulous, I've got to go back?
We don't want to come back. Nobody does. But we do want to grow spiritually. And as I said, it's like you're on a spiritual couch. You cannot, and by the way, it's not up. It's exactly where we are now.
Right. Sorry. Yes.
Exactly here.
It's not up, it's just here.
Higher vibration.
So I'm interested in the concept of soul family. Do we congregate with our soul family on the other side and in this lifetime?
We've had many lifetimes, and we will have many lifetimes. And in each of those, we very often will choose to incarnate in different ways with many of the same people. It's called a soul group, really. And our soul group is part of a larger soul group of many soul groups. And it's sort of like a pyramid of sorts. Eventually, we're united to some extent with every other mind that exists. But we tend to choose the same people over and over. They are our close eternal friends. Many of them are in our lifetime now. Maybe someone was our mother in one lifetime, they're our husband in this one, and then there'll be a child in a different one. But there also are other people in our soul family that just for this lifetime, and typically for no other. For example, I had to come in at a specific time, and there was no one in my family, my soul group, that was going to be in a position to be my parents. So we chose a family or a couple who actually had a mistaken conception. And fortunately, it was before Roe v. Wade, and I was the result. And that let me be born in the right place and in the right time to do what I needed to do in this lifetime.
How amazing that you received this information. And since we're on the...
It gets easier. It really does. I mean, most people can't communicate in the daytime with their spirit guides, primarily because they don't believe they can. We don't realize how powerful our minds are. If you tell yourself, and this is another thing Jesus said, if you have this little tiny bit, the size of a mustard seed of true faith, and he doesn't mean faith in religious stuff, he just means belief that you can do something, then you'll be able to tell this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and the mountain will obey you. That's how powerful your own mind is. But we don't believe that we can do anything, and therefore we can't do anything. But all of us have a spirit guide, and actually usually several, and they are speaking with us all the time. We just don't recognize that that's what we are feeling or hearing. So we meet at night because at night we leave our bodies and travel in the astral, and we meet with our guides and with our dead loved ones and all of that and have fun.
This is so exciting. I just want to backtrack briefly. Soul groups. What is the concept of soul mates? And we hear about this a lot.
People like to believe that they and whoever it is they love in this lifetime romantically is linked with them forevermore. And that's what they call a soulmate. Mm-hmm. It is true. We have very close soul friends. My guide and I have had 17 lifetimes together. Wow. And our connection is extremely close. I came in to this lifetime so he could, help me with my work, but also because he had things he wanted to complete from his previous lifetime. And I said I would help him do them. So I'm also his avatar. And I know we are extremely close. Soulmates, oh my goodness, except every single one of our 17 lifetimes together, we were both men. So, what does that tell you? All of the lives we ever live are happening at the same time. And so therefore, we can't say, well, a long time ago I incarnated or whatever. It's all happening at the same time. There is no such thing as time. That's an artifact of this level of reality, and it exists nowhere else. And I don't understand it any better than you do.
I'm passionate about this subject, but I don't understand it that well either. But it's so exciting for me.
But the thing about it is, how is that even possible to have all our lives be sort of mushed together, happening at the same time and affecting one another? It's just that they tell us that's what's really going on. And when I say to my guide, look, I can't get it. You got to help me understand it. He says, you won't understand it till you're here. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, we don't know what it is to live without time. They're very comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. And another of the reasons is when we come here, we leave behind most of our mind. Mikey Morgan, who is a wonderful communicator from the 6th level, says that we just sort of put it in a suitcase and put it aside and come here with this limited part of our mind, which is designed for rapid spiritual learning. And then when we go back, we immediately reassume it again. And we suddenly are so much smarter and have all these extra memories. And it's just terrific to merge again with your greater mind. So we don't there's a lot we can't understand while we're here, a lot of it.
It's a very complicated subject. So even though I might have been living in
it's complicated. I spent 50 years studying this stuff, 50 years.
So every life I've lived, I know you don't understand it either, do I? But just say I'm in the 5th century, it's actually happening now. But the other question is, in the future, a future life is happening now as well.
Yes.
Past, present, and future, it's all now.
Yes. Yes, but none of those lives, past, present, or future, is determined, because reality is being created instant by instant, and that includes the entire past. Suppose all of us had a group memory right now, and we shared it, and we all remembered when the Empire State Building fell down, 100%. Then we go to it, and there are the Twin Towers standing, but the Empire State Building is rubble. I'm sorry to be complicated about this, but it really is important for us to cut loose these threads we feel to what we believe is real, because what we believe is real is not. All of this around us is pure illusion. We know that it's illusion for a lot of reasons, but it is changeable, very changeable. There are little times when we kind of catch the past being made more complicated. One tiny example: there are more and more galaxies. They aren't billions of years old. It's like the wallpaper is getting more complicated. The wallpaper against which we live our lives. There was a fellow who had a brand new telescope. This was some years ago. And he fixed it on a place in the heavens where there was nothing. And he verified there was nothing. But he said, gee, you'd think there'd be galaxies there. There's nothing there. And he closed the door, left the room, and he went back a year later. And he looked through the telescope again, and there were billions of galaxies. Now, that couldn't have happened if it wasn't meant to show him that things are getting more complicated. But we do know that, in fact, they are. We've been told that. We'll never be allowed to find the edge of the playpen in which we live. We will never find an edge to the galaxies. They'll go on forever. Until very recently, they thought there was only one galaxy. We call it the Milky Way. That was it. Yeah. But when we could look beyond it, they said, well, we can't let you find an edge. So they made more and more and more of them.
My mind's just ticking about thinking, I've got so many questions and I'm just trying to articulate them. I love the whole concept of time and there is only now. But you also mentioned this is not real. The reality that we perceive is not real. We live in a holographic reality.
There are a few ways to realize how things are real. One thing that you should know is that if you could take, we talk about particles, the particles inside atoms. Mm-hmm. There are no particles. They're all tiny vortices of energy.
Yes.
If you could put a camera inside an atom, it would not photograph particles. It wouldn't photograph anything because there is nothing solid at all. The only reason you can't put your hand right through your desk is because they're both composed of vortices of energy. This is like a very elaborate dream that we're in now. It's a heck of a one. There's no question about that. And because it is being consistently recreated around us in every fraction of there's no such thing as time, but the time that's artificial that happens here, the recreation is happening constantly. So we just assume it's real and solid. It's just that it's not.
And we can also direct our dream or create the dream that we want if we choose to with our thoughts, with our mind.
Brilliantly said. Exactly right. Your mind is so powerful that if you are convinced of something, if you are certain you can do it, you can. It doesn't matter what it is. Your mind is very powerful.
A similar concept to the law of attraction. So we live in a magnetic universe. So
exactly.
Our thoughts and our emotions create the reality. What is real? Am I talking to you now, I guess is the question. Or are we dreaming? We have connected on some level.
But understand the law of attraction, which is what we're really talking about, depends on emotion. Mm. Consciousness is highly emotional. That emotion could be positive or negative. The higher it is, the more perfectly loving it is, the more powerful it is. The weaker it is, the more fear-based, anger, hatred, all of those negative emotions, the weaker your own emotions are, the weaker your consciousness consciousness is, your power is. You don't have any power. That's why we know there's no devil. It's not possible. If there were a really powerful negative entity, it would violate every conceivable law of consciousness physics. Not possible. There are demons, but the demons don't have much power either, except if they can get together and cause mischief. That's it.
It just reminds me of an analogy, and I want to talk about the demons, but I interviewed a sound guru once, and the words that we're saying, we're communicating, but it's not the words that are so important, it's the actual emotions. He said, you can say, I love you in 100 different ways, and it's still the same words, but it's the emotions that are behind it that mean so much.
That's right. That's right.
So the demons or the negative entities, there's many names for them. They do reside.
Well, there are many kinds of them.
Okay.
Some of them are actually apparently extraterrestrials that are usually they're out of bodies, almost always, it maybe even always, although it's hard to say always about anything that has to do with all of this. They're out of bodies and not visible. But demons feed on our fear. We think the most negative entities that actually exist are what we call shadow men. They tend to present, if you see them, like the opera cape and the evil entity, right, and with the opera cape, all black, and a top hat, that sort of dress. But they only they're allergic to light. So if you keep a light on in your bedroom, they can't affect you. What they tend to do is latch on to somebody in childhood who is scared of them. And that's why a child will say, they're scared of their closet. That's where the shadow man is. He can't hurt you because he's got no power at all. But if he scares you, that's what he feeds on. That's an example of a negative entity. Many people who have done crummy things in their lives will find that when they die, they don't want to go with the relatives who have come to take them home, and they'll stay here. And if they stay here, they can hook up with other people in the same position who are out of bodies, who are basically very negative, and they feed on one another's anger, rage, whatever, and then they can cause trouble. People who use a Ouija board or play with Satanism can end up attracting a real mess, which is one reason we should never do those things.
Okay.
Don't play with negativity. There's no positive to come out of it, and much pain.
It was interesting. I was discussing with someone once that when these negative energies feed off you, it's almost like they put fearful thoughts in your mind or encourage fearful thoughts. That's
what they do. Because if you aren't afraid, they have no power at all. If the thought of them appearing in front of you doesn't bother you, and it shouldn't, because they have no power over you at all you have to do is just, make the sign of the cross or say, Jesus loves me, or anything. Let's talk about the process of dying.
Okay.
A natural death where you're sick or old or whatever, and you're dying, is always attended by your loved ones. They are usually around you for days ahead. If you're sitting with someone who's dying, they'll often lie and sort of look up at a corner of the room and not speak to you. And what they're doing is talking in their mind with their loved ones, parents, grandparents, pets, all those who have come for them. We then, and we know a lot more about what the process of dying is, but once they're out of their body and that the cord that has connected them to the body breaks, we call it the silver cord. That's what the Bible calls it, is the silver cord. The body dies. They're free. They're very happy. They feel terrific. And the people who have come for them will then escort them to a slightly higher level in the same place where a whole new glorious reality is waiting for them. It's very much as if your mind were a TV set and you just tune it to a slightly higher channel in the same place. And it's as long as if you're dying, just remember one thing: go with the people who've come for you, because if you focus only on them and you leave with them, you will have no problems at all. Mm-hmm. You lower your vibration when you do that and focus on the living instead of the dead, and you then will stop seeing those who come for you. Most ghosts are created, seem to be anyway, created that way. There are people who at the moment of death were focused on the people around the bed and not on the people who would come for them. And they cannot then perceive those people anymore. And they're stuck in time. And they're literally stuck in time. People who own a very old house will sometimes say, well, there's this lady who walks through the wall. Well, there was a door there in the 1800s when she lived in that house. And to her, everything looks the same as it did when she died. Those are not, those people will not harm you. They're just confused. And there's an effort, massive effort made to rescue all of them. And eventually they all will be rescued.
That's a really good point. Is there any way we can assist to help them transition?
Yes. Yes, there are people. Bruce Moen, who has since gone ahead himself, did a course once. I was very curious because I'm curious about all this stuff, and I didn't understand a lot of things at the time. I took a course with Bruce on rescue work, and I told him I can't be hypnotized. He thought that was a silly thing for me to say, and I said I don't think I want to go out of body. He said you won't need to. What Bruce Moen did was to talk a room full of people through the whole process. And we were able, I didn't know, I was sitting there with my eyes closed. Suddenly I was on a road and there was somebody beside me, and he was telling the whole room of the person beside you is the guide who's going to do the rescue. Your job is to get the attention of the person who needs to be rescued. And so then there was a thicket. He also said we should imagine that guide in a way that would, and I said, okay, I'm going to imagine somebody, a little boy, an 8-year-old boy with knickers on. Remember, like this is a little boy from 100 years ago, because that seemed about as innocuous a thing as I could imagine. So yeah, he didn't mind being imagined that way, even though he was probably an upper level being. He took me to a courtyard, which was very, very old looking, because this is what was in the mind of the person we were rescuing. And there was a woman with a mob cap, dressed like someone from the maybe early 1700s, sitting at a sewing machine, at a spinning wheel. Right. And this person could not perceive the guy with me, who now looked like an 8-year-old, but she could perceive me because I'm alive. My vibration was closer to what she was used to from her previous lifetime. And my job was to get her to notice him. She was a very cranky old woman. Who the heck are you and why are you here? That kind of thing saying to me. But once he got her attention, he was able to persuade her to go with us. She got away from the spinning wheel and walked with us. And then I was told that I could follow behind. So I did. And we ended up in a beautiful sort of town square from the early 1800s. And there was a whole group of people. And this woman, when she saw them, she was so excited. And she started to change in appearance right that minute. That was her family. He stepped back then when her family was hugging her and loving her. And I said, my goodness, that's a beautiful thing that's happening. He said, yeah, she's been waiting. They have been waiting for her for a very long time. And wow. I said to Bruce afterwards, I said, well, that was a beautiful thing. I helped an old lady finally go to her family. Isn't that wonderful? He said, yeah, it is. So I said, well, how often do you want us to try to do this? He said, every day. The people who need to be rescued are so many that if you did this every day, you couldn't even begin to make a dent. I never did it again. I mean, I couldn't do it without his help.
Yeah.
But that's how many people there are and how long many of them have been waiting to be rescued. All it took for that woman to be stuck in time was for her to be distracted at the wrong moment when she had left her body. So another bit of advice I would give people is, if you love someone who is dying and has just died, do not make a fuss. If you want to make a fuss, leave the room. Don't make a fuss in that person's presence, because they're still there in the room, even though you can't see them anymore.
That's a really good point. Focus on the family that's come to collect you.
They have to, yes, you've got to do that, because otherwise you can get stuck. And it can take a long time in terms of Earth time to be rescued. Now, to you, it seems that that 400 years was just a long afternoon. That's all it will seem to you. That's how different time is to people who are not in bodies. But still, it's hard. It's terribly hard for those who love you, who go on afterwards, and you're not there with them. You're stuck in this, 18th century kitchen over and over again, making dead dinner for people who long ago have died.
And does I'm going to call them the ghost, or the person who hasn't been able to transition, do they know that they've kind of missed the boat? Do they know that they're dead?
Yes and no. They don't really know, but they do sort of know. They're not back with their greater mind, so they can't really process what's going on, but they know it's not normal. And sometimes back with anger, when people try to interrupt their little reverie, which feels safe to them. Sometimes they just stubbornly say, I know I'm stuck here. I'd rather stay here. You go do something else. I don't fully understand it because I don't like it, and therefore I haven't done a lot of studying of it. Right. But it does seem to be a problem which we can easily solve by simply not distracting people, letting them go home. Once they get there, we can easily communicate with them.
Communication is this is going to segue me into communication. You mentioned, I'll just backtrack, but with the spirit guides, how you say, obviously they're talking to us all the time. How do we listen to them more during the day and receive guidance from our spirit guides?
The first thing you get to do is develop a way to communicate with them at night, because we're meeting with them, but we don't remember those meetings. So for many years, all I would do would be to ask a question. I would say, I'd like to know about this or that. Should I take this job? Should I do this other thing? What do you think? And will you please, leave the message in my mind in the morning. If you do that every night and you're firm about it and you believe you're going to get a message, you'll be surprised how well you get those messages. You've heard the phrase "sleep on it." Yeah. This is what's happening. You're putting the question to your guides. They're giving you the answer in the morning. That's when we are most alive. When our bodies are sleeping, we go out of our bodies. We travel in the astral. We meet with our guides. We meet with our dead loved ones. We have so much fun because our minds never sleep. And during that time, whatever question you have, they will be happy to answer it. It's just that you have to believe it in order for you to be able to perceive their answer.
Interesting. And the more you practice this, the more
like anything else. Yeah.
It's almost like feeling the vibration of what are becoming friends with them, that we're able to recognize them during the day.
That's right. And it's a wonderful friendship. It's really unlike any other. I mean, this being has chosen to spend his or her in your lifetime, but all his or her time during your lifetime, helping to make sure you get the most out of this lifetime in terms of spiritual growth, and helping you do other things too that you and they have planned beforehand. It's a wonderful life. It really is, when you are working with your spirit guide also to do good things in the world. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So what does it feel like when you are during the day? Obviously you have such a direct and wonderful communication. How do the messages come to you during the day from your spirit guide?
Probably everybody's getting them this way, but when you don't understand who you're, about your guide, you can't pull them apart. They're a little bit, I was just thinking they're a little bit like random thoughts, and he said that's not exactly right. So he's always to my left and behind my shoulder. Even if I'm sitting in a chair as I am now, he's behind my shoulder, and he talks to me. But he doesn't do it. He does it in boluses of ideas, which is how we speak in the afterlife. We don't use words.
Yes.
We use ideas. And then I'll express his ideas in words, and he will sometimes tell me I didn't get it quite right. And sometimes many people actually have conversations with their guides. He doesn't like doing it that way. He wants it to be more of an internal communication. And, who am I to say anything about that? Sure. It's up to him. But we all of us have a guide. You can't be in a body without a guide. So it's just great to get to know them. And I'm a channel. All of my books were channeled. I didn't realize that in the beginning. I just writer, but they're all channeled. I can't write without him. Without his giving me the ideas, giving me the table of contents, and then doing, all the channeling, I can't write.
What a
We do a
beautiful
blog post every week on robertagrimes.com, and I get so many compliments, but they're really all his work.
What a beautiful communication between the two of you. Do you ever think, oh no, that's not him, it's just a thought that I've thought in my mind? Or there's definitely a difference?
There was a time when I had to learn to distinguish him. I had to learn where he was, number one, and they'll show you where they are. If you've had someone behind you, you know what the sense is. You have the sense of being stared at or something. That's how I first came to recognize him in the daytime. But you learn. It's quite a distinctive thing. It's like having two minds in your same head or something. I don't know.
No.
This is much smarter than mine is to say. And since this is the first time, I think, that we've had a male-female relationship at all, and he doesn't really care for it. He much prefers that I be male as well, because he thinks I'm silly, and I have to try to be a lot more serious for him.
What a wonderful connection. It must be just so supportive to have that incredible support that's always readily available.
It's a great love relationship. It really is based in love. I mean, he loves me, I love him.
So that takes me to the question, how do we communicate with our deceased loved ones, which so many people, I mean, I'm sure you get this question all the time, but how do we communicate with our loved ones past?
In order for it to work, you've got to believe that's what you're doing, that you are making it possible for communication to happen. So I would just talk to them. And you can't be we tend, the people who most want to communicate with their dead loved ones are people who are grieving. If you have that, grief is one of the worst emotions. And so it's tragic, but it's true. If you're in deep grief, you're not going to be able to do it, because your own grief will block your ability to communicate. Mikey Morgan, and I recommend his book strongly. It's called Flying High in Spirit. He's a 6th level being who took an extra lifetime in order to be able to communicate with us. So he died from that when he was 20, and in 2007, and he needed to get his mother to the point where she could, basically take dictation from him. But in the beginning, he couldn't communicate with anybody in his family. They were too upset by his death. And so he had to go at it gradually. And they will do that with us too. But it's very important to them to prove to us that they're fine. And it's sort of like postcards home. There are people in the afterlife who specialize in teaching them how to communicate, and will be doing that. So if you've lost someone, try to get over the grief as soon as possible and just open your mind. But once you know that you get a good validation even through a medium. There are some good mediums, but not many. Once you get that, just let them go and have fun. Don't try to hold them close to the earth, because they will stay, and then that takes away their fun. You don't want to do that.
It is interesting, and I do say that to people as well. We talk about vibrations. They're on a much higher frequency or vibration than us, but when one's in such grief after a passing, it's very hard to connect. It's very hard to say don't be so unhappy, but the higher vibratory level we can achieve, we're able to connect much more with our deceased loved ones.
I mean, I didn't cry when my mother died. I was very close to her entire life. I was just glad for her she was out of that body. But if I had thought she had blinked out when she died, that would be a whole different thing. I just know she's fine. And she has communicated with me, and I know she's having the time of her life. It's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, I just think it's such a powerful and important message, and not to be afraid of death. Obviously there's probably no limit, but how many times do we reincarnate into this physical body?
As many times as it takes. Some people are harder cases than others. If you want to do it, you can. I don't care what your age is now. You can make this your last earth lifetime if you want to do it. But you just have to focus on raising your vibration. That has to be very important to you. If it's not, then you'll be back again and again. The Buddhists call it turning on the wheel, but it is in your power to stop that turning and to stay there and then become a spirit guide to others, which is what they tend to do when they first stop incarnating, because they very much remember what it's like to be on Earth. Very quickly we forget, because this is not where we want to be. We want to be home. Home is the good part. But for a little while we do guide people. This is I'm pretty confident this is Thomas, my guide's first guidance situation. He just finished incarnating.
So interesting. And my question is, some people, are born into a life of much greater suffering than others. Have they chosen that to accelerate their soul's growth?
Yes, they're ambitious. In fact, we feel so powerful when we're there. There actually are councils which will meet with us and our guides and the people who are going to be in our lives and their guides, and review what we've planned to see whether or not they'll let us carry out that whole plan, because it's so ambitious. Yes, you can lose your entire family in a horrible fire, but you cannot also become a quadriplegic in the same fire, because you will not be able to carry that much pain. So, maybe you just hurt your leg in the fire. Why don't we do that? That's the kind of discussions, believe it or not, that go on.
Wow.
Because nobody dies. Our family is fine. All the people who have been murdered, all the people that we grieve for, they're all fine. They're happy. And that what they went through is meant to help us grow spiritually. It gives us negativity to push against. Choosing to forgive, choosing love in every circumstance. That's how you grow spiritually.
And what about the concept of judgment or karma? If we do terrible things or bad things in this lifetime or hurt other people, does that have consequences?
Sure. Karma is a religious term. I don't use it. Mm-hmm. But Mikey Morgan does use it, and he's a 6th level being. He picked it up while he was here the last time. If we have done negative things to people, we feel the need, once we get home, to balance it out. Yes, there's a judgment. The only judge, though, is ourselves. We review like a hologram our entire life, and we get to feel how we made everybody else in that lifetime feel in ourselves. All the grief we caused, all the pain, all the joy, all the happiness, all the things we have ever caused to other people in this life, we feel. And then we are asked to forgive them, and we always do. Concentration camp guard murdered my children. I forgive you. My kids are right here. They're fine. They're grown up now, but they're fine. It can be very, very hard to forgive ourselves, even for small things we did. My father, I thought I had a pretty good childhood, but there were some things. He was, for example, a drunk till I was 11, and he drank every weekend heavily. For 20 years after he died, he would often appear if I was experimenting with mediums, but he never spoke. Finally, 20 years later, one of my daughters consulted a medium, and he came through to her and he said, "Will you please ask your mother and your sister to forgive me for having messed up their childhood?" He couldn't forgive himself for that. I mean, when I think of all the things, before I understood this, I did a lot of things I wish I hadn't done, but I believe I can forgive myself because I have spent a very long time trying to help other people. And that is something I'll get to feel the joy of when I get home.
Wonderful. And you did talk about channeling, but also you have an interesting book that you take on the life of Thomas Jefferson. What's that about?
There's a story behind that. When Jesus decided it was time to help us understand what he really came to do, he led the group that channeled A Course in Miracles, which came through in the late 1960s. and is very advanced teaching. I mean, I needed to do a course to try to understand A Course in Miracles. So by the 80s, it was realized by those around Jesus that they missed the mark again.
Oh no.
Shot, and then they overshot. So they decided how to do it right this time. But what they needed was what they called a pure channel. They needed someone who was not known to be a channel and yet could channel. And since one of the attributes I had come into this lifetime with was the ability to channel, so I could channel my guide when the time came. He's such a sport. He proposed me as the channel for Jesus.
Wow.
But he had to prove I could channel. So what he did, he never having written an autobiography in his life, personal autobiography, he led me through researching and then channeling 10 years of his life as Thomas Jefferson. Wow. And that's that book. And it was easy, and I felt brilliant. It's the best thing I'll ever write, by the way. It's just beautiful. Everyone who has ever read it says that. But of course, it's not me at all. It's his team that did it. And when it was done, it was immediately bought by Doubleday. The first editor who saw it bought it. And it came out in 1993. But the point wasn't to do the book. The point was to prove to Jesus I could channel. So that proved it. And they spent the next 20 years preparing me to channel Jesus. I didn't find this all out till long afterwards, by the way.
Oh, great. You weren't informed by...
I was ignorant about all of this. I thought I was just smart and I could write more books like my Thomas. Of course, I couldn't. So life went on.
And channeling Jesus, are you channeling it through your guide, or you're channeling directly through Jesus?
It was Jesus. What happened was he started telling me it was time to do that book. It's called Liberating Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I told him I was not ever going to do anything like that. Who was I to presume to channel Jesus? I'm very devout, or I still was then quite devout. And so that was why he got a medium and broke into my daytime life in 2015 and explained to me what the stakes were and told me that he knew I didn't want to do it, but I had to do this. So yeah, then, I mean, if you have Thomas Jefferson say, hey, guess what? You came into this lifetime to do this. Now you got to do it. You do it.
You don't really have a choice.
But I didn't know I was going to be I thought he was going to do the book. And then I got a call from the medium who said, by the way, he just seized me in a parking lot of Walmart and told me to tell you that the energy was going to be a whole lot higher now because you're going to be working directly for the master. And if you can't handle it, just let us know. He didn't put it quite that way, but that was what they said. And the next day at 2:00 in the morning, I started to channel this amazingly this energy that was far above anything I have ever felt before or since.
And everyone has different methods of channeling. So it's almost like Jesus entered your physical body.
I guess. I mean, it was in my mind. And he, as I got more used to it, we did the whole book in 2 weeks. I did sleep a little in between sessions. That was it.
How amazing! And do you record it on a voice recorder, or do you type it or write it?
No, I was typing as fast as I could type. And he treated me like a word processor. And I would be, suddenly my fingers would stop and my attention would be drawn to an earlier line. I wouldn't see what was wrong. And then I would go back and but he would keep drawing me back until I realized he wanted me to change a word or 2 words or even a little phrase. I would change it and then we would go on again. And then he started to talk. I would hear him saying, why won't you listen to me? And I know he wasn't talking to me because I was listening, but he was frustrated, so frustrated about all the people who ignore what he said. Mm. Because he told us his words are what is important, and we still ignore those words. To this day, people ignore those words. So what they've done is to lead me through all this blogging, which is getting us to the point of reinstituting the Lord's way. He called it the way. His earliest followers called it the way. It's the way. It works, and it works beautifully. I mean, he came as from the highest aspect of the Godhead, according to Thomas. He's way above anybody else who's ever entered a body, and it's time for us to start listening to him.
Beautiful message. I don't know whether to say congratulations or not about the book, or who to congratulate.
Not me. I'm just the servant. Thomas,
well, thank you for being a servant.
Well, Thomas is the one, because Thomas is trying very hard to finish work that he tried to do when he was Thomas Jefferson, and he never managed to get it done. He's really still very down on himself about that lifetime, less so now than he was. But he came into that lifetime with some purposes that were very specific, one of which was to do this work for Jesus. And he actually did do quite a bit of it. If people study his lifetime, they find that he did things like what's called the Jefferson Bible, where he had a study Bible of what Jesus had said. And it's in English, French, Latin, and Greek, pasted side by side in a copybook, so he could better understand what Jesus was saying. But he didn't get nearly enough of that done either. So now we're trying to do what he tried to do when he came here, which has nothing to do with starting a country. That was not his original plan, apparently.
Amazing. And going back to our previous conversation, so Thomas, your guide now is your guide, but he's also Thomas Jefferson now, if everything's happening right now, which is again... When he left that lifetime, he says he was so disgusted. He said, I had too much power and I didn't use it well. So he immediately took a optional final lifetime. That was supposed to have been his last lifetime, as a guy in Wales named John. I don't know his last name, so I can't look him up. And as soon as that lifetime ended and he was back in what we call the afterlife, which is really real life, he resolved to fix some of the things that he wanted to fix when he was Jefferson and never did. And that was why we planned that I would come in and do that for him, because I'm, his sidekick from 17 lifetimes. Right. And then it became very clear that it was urgent that we do this because of the need to raise the consciousness vibration of the planet. So that's why we chose a family, and I came in as quickly as I could. But I always was going to write a book about what Jesus actually came to do and what he actually meant. I just, at the time I entered, it was not to channel Jesus. At the time I entered, it was to channel Thomas. And I give him all the credit for all of this, all of it. It belongs to him. Well, I have to give you credit for trusting yourself, because all of us could be channels. It's just that we don't trust or listen to the messages.
I didn't trust, did I? I didn't until he broke into my life, which is where if there's a code of honor among spirit guides, is that you do not, get them to pretend that it's their mother wanting to talk to them. Get them to hire a medium of your choice and then break into that. That's not done if you're a spirit guide. Right. But he had no choice, because I was not listening to him. I wasn't taking him seriously during our meetings. So he knew he had already programmed me to, do that work, researching and then writing about Thomas Jefferson. So he knew I had an affinity right there anyway. And so all he had to do was to say that he was my primary guide and I could call him Thomas. I said, oh my God, Thomas Jefferson. And then the medium said, oh my God, that's who it is.
Wow, very interesting.
But he doesn't think of himself that way now. He doesn't. He came through Leslie Flint, who was a great independent voice medium in the middle of the 20th century. And he was obviously bored out of his gourd then, because I was 14 years old and he was having to guide some ditz of a 14-year-old girl. So he took away a little space from that and came through as Thomas Jefferson to the Leslie Flint seance that was then being held. And the medium who first channeled him to me said, I didn't realize, I guess I didn't really believe it until I heard that that recording because he was exactly the same guy. He wouldn't talk to them about his lifetime as Jefferson. His interest then was in trying to bring world peace and telling us we had to hug the big bear, the Russians and all of that. This was the 60s. The Cold War was really hot at the time. But what's amazing is I'm told one of my lifetimes was to be a young man when he was old. And I think I even know who that person was. And I helped him with his work on studying Jesus and trying to write the book he was trying to write, and he was a very old man. And when I heard that voice, it was the same voice. I can't tell you how emotional that was. It was just, these people who come through direct voice mediums, through the good ones, sound like the same person they were in life, even though it's an ectoplasm voice box that has to be modified to suit them. They don't have a breath to make that, it's amazing that it works, but it does work.
Yeah. I know you do have a few recommendations on your website, which I will put in the show notes for everyone, your website, for people to connect with you if they're looking for a medium. One of your books, and you have touched on this so much, how to raise your consciousness, but you do discuss how to live your best life. What are the tips to live our best lives?
The most important thing anyone can do is convince yourself that your life is eternal. You live very differently when you're living in eternity while you're still in a body, to all spirit. So you live as if your mind is open to spirit. One of the blog posts that I wrote is called Cleaning Up Your Living Room. That's your mind. I recently done a podcast about it too, which will come out in another week or so. But if you want to live your best life, you've got to live it as if you are in eternity, because that's where you are going to spend nearly all your time. This is so temporary. And it doesn't take anything away from your life. You try to live it in a way that you will always be proud of, even 1,000 years from now. It really doesn't take anything away.
And it's so simple as well, but yet we don't always adhere to.
It's simple.
Simple.
But your thoughts are not private, so you start to learn to elevate your thought. You allow there never to be any fear, hatred, anger, any of the negativity in your thoughts that you think now nobody is going to know about. Yes, your guides certainly know about it. God certainly knows about it. And more to the point, you're keeping your own personal vibration low. And if you do that, you're going to be coming back again and again and again. This isn't the fun part of life. This is the hard part. And if you want never to have to come back, then you clean up your act completely. And it makes you much happier, by the way. I should just tell you, this isn't being a nun and going and feeding the poor. This is just living your life with grace and without allowing negativity ever to pollute anything you say or do.
And I found with me, it does take practice. We do live in our humanness. Sometimes we have negative thoughts, but it's just not to dwell there as often. And the more, well, speaking from my own personal experience, the more you practice, the less of those negative or fear-based thoughts occur.
Perfectly true. I actually keep some happy thoughts always at hand. I don't have to do this really anymore because I don't get negativity anymore. But in the beginning, this guy cut me off again in traffic, or if my husband does that one more time, I'm going to just, smash his head, whatever. I would keep happy thoughts that I could immediately replace anything negative with. And now I don't have to. Now I never go there.
Yeah.
My husband used to be a terrible person. I've been married almost 50 years. Now he's a wonderful person. Wonderful. He's a saint. But you know what? He hasn't changed at all. I'm the one who changed. So many people would be able to have wonderful marriages if only they would work on themselves. Mm. And when I did, I'm so blessed. I have a wonderful, wonderful husband.
That's a great way to put it. We often look outside for the things to change us internally, when in fact, if we change ourselves, we do change the life or the hologram or this perceived reality around us?
I have asked him whether he